Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
We are the Farm for Profit Podcast, here to work with John Deere, put some really good content together. And we're going to have a discussion today about these two first-generation farmers. And we're going to explore maybe what they found went well during their journey to where they've gotten, or what they wouldn't do again, and see if we can't put some good conversation together around what it takes to get into farming. So as we jump in here, we'll go ahead and have the two of you introduce yourself. We've got Gavin Spohr and Ethan Clark here. Let's go with who you are, where you farm, and what your social media handles are. Go ahead, Gavin.
All right, so I'm Gavin Spohr, first-gen farmer from northeast Missouri, little town of Ladonia, growing corn, soybeans, and popcorn. And, hell, I already forgot your whole question. You got me rambling here. What was the last half of that?
What's your social media handle?
Yeah, Gavin Spohr on most of my social medias. On TikTok, I am the popcorn farmer.
Nice.
The popcorn farmer.
Yep.
All right, Ethan, you.
So I'm Ethan Clark. Washington, Indiana. I'm trying to think of the question now, too. Washington,
Where
Indiana.
are you from? What do you farm?
Corn, soybeans, row crop, predominantly. Dabbling back into cattle. And social media would be Clark Farms on YouTube, the Ethan Clark on Instagram, and TikTok's not real PG, so we'll leave that off. But
We can find you out there.
yeah,
Awesome.
it's out there.
So, do you guys remember when you decided you wanted to be a farmer?
I was young,
That tall.
a couple years old.
Yeah.
That young?
Yeah, Mom and Dad said they can remember me getting on my tippy toes and staring out the kitchen window, watching my neighbors farm out the kitchen window. And whenever they were running out of the dining room window or driving down the road, I'd run back and forth between the two.
Huh.
It's funny you brought up the pedal tractors over there, because I've actually got trophies from doing that at like county fairs and stuff. So I was young enough that it goes way back.
All right, so you guys remember being extremely young.
Yeah. I don't remember being young, but
But it is, you wanted to be a farmer for that long. You knew early on.
That's what we're told.
That's what you're
Yeah.
told.
Yeah.
So did either of you have family in the business?
No.
Well, that's how you can't be a first-generation farmer if you got family in the business.
Well, even grandpas and maybe skip a generation, et cetera, et cetera. Did you have anybody that you looked up to?
the people I looked up to would be the local farmers I rode with. My grandfather did farm. He passed away in 1997 or 1977. I was born in 97, so 20 years before I was born, he had passed away. Mom and Dad both had town jobs. They don't own any land or anything. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was in the blood. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
That's interesting. So, after you decided at a young age that you had this love and passion for farming, was there ever a time when you didn't think it would happen?
Yeah, I always wanted to try and make it happen. I never thought I'd be doing it full time. I thought I'd be doing it on the side as a hobby, until I could make it a full-time thing, which essentially I did. But it's so capital intensive. When you're little, it's neat to look at the tractors and want to do it, but when you start putting numbers to it, it gets real intimidating, but you can't let that scare you away from doing it either.
Yeah.
So you talk about capital and going towards it. Did you have a number in mind, like what it took to start? I mean, were we going to use other people's equipment, or were you going to go buy a $180,000 tractor and buy a $100,000 planter and buy $1.8 million worth of farmland and let's just keep adding the bills?
Right.
I mean, did you have like, it's going to take me $4 million to start, it's going to take me $3 million?
From the get-go, I was just reinvesting whatever money I had made the previous year. So all through high school, I worked for local farmers. When I got to college and rented I started with 6 acres. I mean, I started with next to nothing. I didn't have my own equipment. The guy I was working for at the time, we did exchange of labor. I used his planter and combine that first year. I took what little money I made off that 6 acres, put a down payment on a tractor, bought an old rusty planter, and slapped in the next 100 acres the next year, got a small operating note from the local bank, and just kept doing that over and over and throwing everything back into it and trying to keep up with equipment as I grew in acres. Kind of it's helped the past couple years with the amount of inflation. You've been able to buy a piece of equipment, turn around and sell it, and not totally lose your butt or even make money on it. So that's helped a lot.
So you said you got another 100 acres. Did you buy another 100 acres, or are you, as a young farmer, do you tell other young farmers you have to rent?
I rent 100% of my tillable acres.
Gotcha.
The only 2 acres I own are where I live.
So how'd you get competitive to get that other 100 acres? Because I'm sure there's 9 other farmers that wanted that other 100 acres, and they probably would give just as much cash rent as you.
Right, good question. So I looked for the table scraps, the acres that other people were overlooking.
Okay.
The small patches, the trees all the way around. Maybe a landowner just wanted some acres cleaned up, and they also had some tillable ground to go along with it. I put in that sweat equity. Also made Craigslist and Facebook ads. It said I'm a young guy.
Did?
Yeah, I said I'm young. I have nothing to prove that I'm good at this. I don't want to step on any toes or take something. I'm just looking for an opportunity. What's out there?
Yep.
So I had a guy off a Craigslist rent me 40 acres that was like 30 miles from home, but I was hungry, so I went and did it.
Okay.
I'm still farming that ground. You know, I've not lost any ground since I've started, and it's just stair-step from there.
Yep.
That is wild. What about you, Ethan?
So I started with 15 acres the first year I farmed, borrowed equipment. Essentially, I had very good mentors coming up, a couple of neighboring farmers, small farms, 300 acres and under, very small farms, that took me under their wing. And I had a lady right before I was getting ready to go to college that had 15 acres, and she said, "Do you want to farm this?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have equipment, but yeah, it'd be neat."
Yeah.
So the guy I'd worked with for years and years and years and ultimately bought the farm from that I have now, he said, "Well, you can just use my equipment and work it off, whatever." It was just 15 acres. And I wasn't going to be able to afford to go buy my own equipment for 15 acres. So and to piggyback, and he touched on this, not taking a check out of farming. Anything I made farming went back into the farm. I was working other jobs. I was working UPS, I was doing construction, I was doing all kinds of other stuff outside of farming to live off of, because you cannot, it's very hard to get started farming and make a living off of that farm and expect to make a living off that farm without reinvesting almost every dime that you make in it back into it.
So when do you stop? When do you stop having to reinvest every dollar back into it?
I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I live off the farm now, but
that's a valid answer, right?
I still, I mean, that said, I would like to diversify a little more, because I look at some of the most successful farms around me aren't necessarily the best farmers. They're the best businessmen.
Yep.
And they're all diversified. They're into they're into things other than just farming. That way, the years where farming's not so great, they have something else to piggyback off of. And
so give me some examples, like hog confinements, cattle, ethanol, like
so cattle,
things are you
crops,
thinking?
Construction, tiling, trucking.
Okay.
Find your niche market. I mean, there's money to be made if you're willing to look.
Yeah.
You can look anywhere and find a way to make money.
On my operation, I do some skid loader work. I have a skid loader for my own farm, but I can't make the payment with the farm income.
Yep.
So the rest of the year, I use the skid loader, do forestry mulching or moving some dirt, try to keep a couple semi-trucks on the road. If nothing else, just to keep employees busy.
Yeah.
That way, they're there in the busy season.
That's actually a good question that I kind of skipped over. So, Gavin, you have employees.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
How many employees do you have?
I've got one full-time guy. He's like my right-hand man. Might as well be my best friend. I mean, we're together every day.
Yep.
And I wouldn't really consider my dad or mom an employee, but, man, when it comes to needing to do parts runs or bringing food to the field, then some part-time help, and then my girlfriend Grace is like during wheat harvest, she hauled every single bushel of wheat that we combined. So
Wow.
yeah.
So if you're reinvesting all the money back into the farm, how do you buy an engagement ring for your girlfriend? Is the next question.
We
for
need corn to go back to 7 or 8 bucks.
Yeah.
She knows. She knows.
Is that you just buy as big of a ring as whatever the commodity price is for that? Is that all right? Fair enough. Fair
Who was
enough.
it?
The
We
basis was bad this year.
That
sorry.
basis
Yeah.
was horrible. but-
We had another interview with Junkyard Diggs, and his engagement ring was a bejeweled hose clamp.
Oh yeah. Perfect.
So put some hot glue on it and some
Yep.
jewels.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a thought that counts.
That's what he said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, Ethan, do you have any employees?
Yeah, so I hired my first guy about this time last year full-time, and he's worked out great. And I put it out there that I was looking for somebody, and I'd had part-time help, spring and fall for 3-4 years. But I put it out that I was looking for a full-time guy all year long, and I was kind of overwhelmed at how many people wanted to do that. I had ran through several part-time employees. As anybody knows, it's hard to find good help. And I'd ran through a few that, they were good at first, then they kind of wouldn't show up, and then they would, and just not real dependable. And so I put it out that I was looking for a full-time guy, and I had just an overwhelming amount of people that wanted to do that, and which kind of surprised me, honestly.
Why do you think that was?
I mean, everybody enjoys to drive a tractor. That's the vacation part about farming. Nobody wants to wrench on them, but everybody wants to drive them. And I said, I'm looking for somebody that can do both. And I said I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't go do myself. I'm not just going to make them do all the, $10 an hour jobs.
Yep.
They'll get to do other stuff too. And the guy I hired came from a co-op, has a Class A CDL, has an applicator's license, and he's had a passion for farming and ag his whole life, just like we have. Mm-hmm. And the reason I hired him is he wanted to have skin in the game too, and he rented his first 200 acres this year, and he's farming that using my equipment as well. And so he's getting a start now too, which I think is awesome to see that, because I had an opportunity to do that, and I had help to get started doing that. And so I'd love to help people like that as well.
For all of our listeners, you said you started with 15 acres. I'm not asking you how many acres you farm, but when do you make the call that, all right, I can't do it myself anymore. I got 500 acres. Now I need to hire a guy. Like, you got to know when the juice is worth the squeeze to hire that other person to be able to expand, even for normal businesses. When do we hire the secretary? When do we hire the person to answer the phone, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
As a new upcoming farmer, you've bought your own equipment, you've rented ground out, you've tried to expand, you've tried extra jobs to do that. Now we're getting just big enough. When do we become an operation?
Just when I first started out, I was still in college full time, so I could do most of it on my own. And the first year that Jaron, my right-hand man, he just helped spring and fall, but he's a certified welder, so the rest of the year he could go make big money on the road.
So he had a side job.
So he had a side job. And then as I expanded and got busier, he just spent more and more time on the farm until now he is full-time.
Yep.
I'm struggling with that myself, because I don't know at what point do I hire the secretary or, those jobs, because I'm trying to do them myself, and I can just barely manage it now.
Yeah.
But when do you have enough leftover money you can make the jump and make that a full-time
It's
job?
hard to justify it.
So I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that, because I'm struggling with it too. I don't know when to jump in.
But that's one of the best answers.
And
he's a real answer.
He hit the nail on the head. Is neither one of us, and I think I could speak for both of us, entirely know what we're doing yet. I mean, there's no manual on how to do this.
Welcome to podcasting land.
Yeah.
You do it, you figure out what works, and you figure out what doesn't, and hopefully what doesn't's not so expensive that you're not able to do it the next year. But, I mean, it's trial and error.
So oftentimes when you're trying, you make mistakes, and maybe that mistake is you lose money. Mm-hmm. How long? I'm a new guy. I'm farming. I got some equipment. I got some farmland. I go year 2023, I lose money. Mm-hmm. I go year 2024, the banker gave me some grace. I'm still going to go. How far do we go?
Yeah.
Or how much money does it? I mean, we're talking $40,000 a year, $50,000, until this is not jive, and I have a passion for it. Believe me, I want to do it.
Right.
But I don't see very many that get in this game, because it's an expensive game.
Yeah. It is. I mean, if financially, there's 100 things you could do that make more sense.
Yeah.
You just have to have a passion for it. I think if you don't have that drive, if you're strictly doing it for the money, I think you'd just be burnt out on it no more than you get started.
The past couple of years have been really good.
They have.
Price-wise.
They have.
I try to take as much risk off the table beforehand as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. So finding that cheaper ground that maybe someone else doesn't want. There's not as much reward, but there's not near as much risk.
Right.
Running used equipment. Hey, it'd be cool to have shiny paint, but you don't need it. Mm-hmm. And then I've, diversifying into different crops. I did the popcorn because I could name my price. I didn't have to take the commodity price. Just little things like that. Try to take as much risk off the table as you can, and you'll never be able to completely get rid of it. That's just business. There's always going to be risk. That's the risk you take.
Yep.
I will say from the banker side of things that it is, my clients will take another job in order to not stop farming.
Right.
It is truly passion driven by a lot of people that if it does take a hit this year, 2023 is a loss and 24 is a loss, they're going to find a way to stay in it as long as possible. Whether that's right or wrong, that's the trend that you see.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as you guys are thinking about our listeners, the ones that are trying to get into this, we know that there's financial hurdles and it's capital intensive. You talked about starting small, scaling up, working with a bank, getting an operating loan. What other tips or tools or advice you have for somebody looking for capital, access to capital?
Access to capital.
Is it really just save it up?
I can't say that I had a big savings account.
No,
when
I
got
didn't
started.
either. I didn't either.
Start small. I mean, I got an operating note from my bank. There's tons of programs available for young farmers that are more advantageous than what your a guy that's been doing it for 30 years. They're going to have a little bit more grace with you. Every situation's so different, and every area of the country is different. I don't have that $500 cash rent and big quarter sections. In my area, it's lots of ground that should probably be cattle pasture, little cut-up patches. And it's a lot easier for me to go rent a 40-acre cut-up piece than it is for a guy in Illinois to try to compete with a big guy trying to go for 160 acres of top-dollar rent. Right. I can talk a banker into renting a small farm a lot easier, where I'm at.
Right. Yeah. As far as capital, I mean, Farm Credit has a growing forward program that I've used quite a bit, which is to help people that are getting started. So there are some advantageous programs out there for farmers that are looking to get a start. It's essentially they let you have a little more risk and a little less interest rate, and they'll kind of take a chance on you a little more.
You both said that you had a mentor or multiple mentors that have helped you get started. Did you ever, though, create almost a partnership? Are there companies or advisors or anybody that you would suggest our listeners to start building relationships with?
Anytime you're in the public, anytime you're out and about, set a good example for yourself. You have to have a good look. You have to be out in the community, be well known, and have a good reputation.
But what if they watch your TikTok? You said it's a little more
right. Yeah, that is. There's a catch-22.
Fair enough.
But you never know. You may be talking to somebody and they don't directly own land, but their cousin does or their nephew does, and then if something happens, the farmer that was farming that retires or decides they want to downsize, whatever it might be, you're the first name that pops up that, hey, he would probably be
the one they think of when they think of farmland.
I ended up renting a farm because there was a guy in the local bar and grill at dinner one night, and he said, I just kicked a guy off, wasn't working for whatever reason. I want a young guy to farm it. Is there anyone in the area? I know they are few and far between. And the bartender who serves me food when I go in there for lunch said, I've got the perfect guy for you.
Yep.
And gave him my number.
Yep.
And, like that, there was another time where a guy who had some ground coming out of CRP went into the FSA office, and they're not allowed to recommend one specific person, but they said, here's a list of 5 or 6 people. We think they're all good. Give them a call. I wasn't even the first guy he called, but I was the first guy who answered. And so I got that up, just little things like that. And it starts to add up over time.
I got you. So that's something I didn't know, that maybe you give your name at the FSA office, or you probably told them that, hey, I want to be on this list, and then they gave out a generic list. But did you tell your banker too? Like say, hey, if you have other people that are retiring, I'm guessing you get calls, Tanner. I as a farm manager get calls, say, do you know a young guy in the area? So I have young guys coming to my office, but they're out networking, so they're putting themselves out there.
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah. And then you got people like Corey, who basically spends his weekends at the nursing homes or funeral homes. The best part about it is he can't hear what I'm saying. So he'll listen to that when it comes out live. No, that's great. And I appreciate that side of it, because we're in an agricultural society to where our neighbors are sometimes the competition.
Yeah.
And it used to be to where we could rely on the neighbors for advice or extra help or extra equipment, and there was a lot more partnerships almost.
Yeah. It's fairly cutthroat. I mean, it is and it isn't. It depends on the relationship you have with the neighbors. You know, some neighbors, you know, everybody's different. And every area is different. Every situation is different. And it's a very... You're always walking on eggshells, especially when it comes to land.
Well, we asked
always on eggshells.
Tony Reed yesterday, or this morning. Was that yesterday? Yesterday morning, we asked him a similar question. I said, do you think people still, older couples would want to rent to the young guy like you're talking about, or is it the mighty dollar? Has it become just business? And he said it's business. Most of the time, it's after the dollar. So that's a hard thing for our listeners to try to get over. Tanner, I get calls all the time. Well, how do I have a chance as a young guy? Well, nobody said you're supposed to have a chance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Don't be entitled, is my comment to him, is, hey, nobody said you get the opportunity to farm. It's if you want the opportunity to farm, go out and get it.
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys have done that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the since I started and I got established, I've had a lot of people say, you know, we need more guys like you. We need more young guys because there's not many more of us. But then at the same time, you see those guys rented out to the top bidder. And, you know, it's free country. That's the beauty of it. They are free to do that. That's fine. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I can't go into it entitled like, well, he says this, but then he does that. But you know what? It's his. It's not yours. You don't get a say in it. If you want a say in it, buy it. Unfortunately, that's not always an option starting out. But
is there any resources that you look? So if you said you can't buy it, so as a new guy, we're renting ground. We're renting whatever we had and hopefully using somebody else's equipment or trying to buy it as cost effective as we can. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, or that's the general tone that I'm getting, is there resources like apps you use or anything to find who is renting that ground, or when is it coming up, or who owns that ground and what's their phone number, or
online plat maps?
Yeah, online plat map all the time. I get bored and just will be clicking on random parcels just to see, and it's like, oh, well, that's so and so's. Okay, that's their grandma. You know,
so you are doing some background research.
Oh, absolutely, and word of mouth too. I mean,
I got you.
You'll know who owns what, but you know, you won't necessarily. Of all the ground I've ever picked up, excluding like the state ground, which is just scrap that nobody else wants. Of all of it that I've picked up, I've known about it before anybody else has, and that's why I've gotten it.
Okay.
But, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're renting ground or buying ground, and I think this is the case most areas you go in ag. If you don't know about it first, you're already out. It's already sold. It's already rented. That contract's already been signed by the time the general public knows.
So how do I get first? So I'll give you a good analogy. A guy told me once, he says, you got to know the guy that's selling the ring. And I said, what do you mean, the guy that's selling the ring? He says, who knows that the guy's going to propose to his would-be fiance before anyone else? I said, well, his buddy. He said, nope, didn't tell his buddies. I said, well, the father-in-law, the future father-in-law. I said, nope, he hasn't even asked his permission yet. Who knows the deal's going to go down before the deal goes down?
Yeah.
The guy who sold him the ring. You got to have the ring before you can ask. So who sells the ring in the agriculture business for young guys to contact? How do you be that guy? How have you been first? That's the $1 million question that every young guy wants to know.
Networking.
There's no answer.
I focus, the way I've been able to grow my acres, at first it was just super random, Craigslist and Facebook ads. I did a really good job with what I had and proved that I could do decent on rough ground. And then they told their neighbor or they told their cousin. And then I picked up a few pieces like that. And then it was just word of mouth that spread to the point where now I never thought I'd turn ground down, but now it's like, that's too far the wrong direction. I don't really want to go that way. But it takes years of working really, really hard to get there.
Yep.
Somehow I've managed to get there in just a few years, which has been great.
Yep.
I know some people spend a full lifetime and never get that far.
I got you.
And I've not lost a piece of ground I've started farming, but I take care of it. I don't, I pay what I always feel like is fair, even on cash rent. I mean, I like cash rent because they know what they're getting and I know what I'm paying. But even years that are good years, I'll write, a bonus, which I don't have to do that, but I do it just to keep them happy. But I've got a lot of road frontage property along highways and stuff, and I keep it mowed, I keep it clean, I keep it sprayed, and I'll maintain it like it's a golf course.
Gotcha.
And, you see seed companies put their signs out. Well, I don't have signs out, but people know who farms it, and that's just as much advertising as anything. And people will take note of that. The right people will take note of that. And
well, I like what Gavin said earlier. Is you made Craigslist ads, you made Facebook ads. I mean, there's a lot of conversations around how you don't want to step on somebody's toes by reaching directly out to their landlord, but that's a generic ad.
It's a blanket. It reaches who it reaches. It's not targeted at anybody specifically.
I've seen some of your posts. It's not I want your landlord's contact information. It's, I have a goal to do this with my operation. I could get help from you by doing X, Y, and Z. It's totally architecture. The comments in architecture.
Yeah, and I, like you said, I post those on Facebook and Craigslist. I use social media a lot. Not even when I'm trying to, not that I'm looking for the opportunity to get ground by making these posts, just throughout the farming year. I do have the ad-specific posts, but I just post stuff that people want to tag along with. Here's how the crop's doing. Here, I'm out brush hogging this week. This is just how my life looks throughout the year.
Yep.
And that's allowed me to meet landlords. It's also allowed me to meet mentors, people that I can talk to throughout the country. There's a ton of guys that I lean on for advice locally, but I've made a lot of great connections. Hell, even like Ethan here. We were friends before either one of us started farming.
We started farming,
just through Instagram. Both of us were farm hands and bouncing ideas back and forth. What's worked for you? What can work for me? And that allows you to excel way quicker if you can use some of what's worked and hasn't worked without needing to go through the ringer yourself.
Don't make the mistake yourself.
Absolutely. And it's, Gavin's in Missouri. He's in a totally different area than me. But it's good to talk to people like him because if you're doing what everybody in your area is doing, you're going to have the same results. And sometimes especially starting out, you've got to think outside the box. You've got to have a specialty crop. You've got to diversify in some way, shape, or form. Because if you're just growing corn and soybeans same as everybody else, but you're not doing it for some sort of premium, or if you're not doing something different.
An extra value add.
Right. I was just going to say, what do you guys have a value add? So even in my business, I sell farmland. There's lots of companies that sell farmland. Just like in your business, there's lots of people that farm. How do you set yourself apart? Is there a value add? Because arguably we all do it the same. We all plant corn and beans. We all, do ads this way or that way, or do something. Is there something or a niche that you, or would you tell people to try to have a value add? Like I mow the ditches. I maintain your grain bin.
And some people don't care about that.
Yeah.
Some people just want to check. But, I want to do both. I'm not the guy. I am not the guy that's going to write you the biggest check most of the time. I will pay what's competitive. I will pay what's fair, but I won't get in a bidding war. I'm not out to farm ground just for saying I farm more ground. I'm out to be a successful, profitable business, not just scaling up for the fact of scaling up. So,
So I got a question for you, and this one just came up the other night. I've been asked, so as an auctioneer and land management company, to auction off the cash rent for folks, but not for the highest price always. So kind of what you talked about.
Okay.
So as a young guy, I'm curious your thoughts on this because I've avoided it because none of us want to say how much we make, how many, etc. So is it a lot of times I pick operators that I know work, and then I go to them and say, hey, you already have a reputation. What would your bid be? What would you do on this? I have a new client that wants to farm around there. But I'm not giving the young guys very much opportunity. If I went public at an auction, auctions are great. Transparency. It gives all young guys the opportunity to bid on it. But again, you might not be the biggest player, but sometimes it's the story. It's the, hey, here's what I am. And it's historically, in my experience so far, they haven't picked the top cash rent. They've picked the story below. Should me and other auction companies auction off cash rents and or stories? Would that give you more opportunity, or do you want that public?
It would give the farmer more opportunity. I would say it would also give the landlord more opportunity because maybe that landlord doesn't even know the small guy exists.
Most of the time they don't.
Yeah, so it would give the landlord the chance to offer it to the young guy at whatever price that he offers, or take the top dollar.
Yep.
I can't fault a guy that's retiring for taking top dollar. He's worked his entire life to get the chance to do that.
And you're not entitled to it at all.
Yeah.
He's got a lifetime in it.
Yeah.
You're 5-6 years into it, But you said...
I just know a lot of the bigger guys that, then let's say it goes for top cash rent. Well, it's public. Let's say it's $480 cash rent. Well, then all the other neighbor landlords don't like me.
I've had that
because
happen.
I'm the guy that just I didn't do it. It was the bidders that did it, but I'm the platform that did it. See, because none of us like our paychecks to, public.
Right.
We don't want it public. So there's a catch there, but I do think it would help young farmers get known more and get the opportunity that they don't have.
I had that happen on a farm. The guy heard what the next farm a couple miles down the road brought a lot more. I was like, well, you don't exactly have the same soil type, but if you want me to get that guy's number for you, if you feel like I'm not doing a good job, I can do that because I don't want you to feel like you're on the losing end of this deal.
Right.
And he ended up sticking with me. But those situations happen. I think that's coming down the pipeline whether we want it to or not.
Right.
So you might as well be on the forefront of it.
Okay. Very good.
So I want to go back to the beginning of our conversation. I think, Gavin, you might have answered it with a tractor and a planter, but these beginning farmers, probably are going to start off renting land and borrowing equipment. Do you remember what the first asset you purchased was?
Sprayer. Pull-type sprayer.
Pull-type sprayer. You didn't even have a tractor.
You didn't have a tractor?
No, I was borrowing the tractor, but a pull-type sprayer. It was, I want to say $1,200. It was 2 saddle tanks very poorly welded on a frame, and a 40-foot boom that I made 60. And I paid for that thing in what I saved in chemical alone that year, because I had the ability to buy from whoever and not tied to the retailer or the applicator, I should say. Right. And so I paid for it the first year, and I've owned my own sprayer ever since.
Do you still own that one?
I do not. It's chopped up in pieces now, but but when you start farming, everybody's situation is going to be different, For me, the planter that we used to run was completely worn out that I was borrowing, and it was either it was going to get completely rebuilt or we could trade it. And I said, well, I'm gaining acreage. Let's take yours and trade it in, and I'll pay the difference of the trade-in. We'll have a bigger planter that's newer, that's in a lot better shape. And we started to do that over and over and over. We did it with a planter. We did it with a combine where he took – because we had a transition plan, and that's huge too. But I was fortunate that I didn't have to necessarily, and there was equipment that I was paying 100% of, but then some of it too. If we already had one, but the acreage was gaining, and that's the thing. Everybody's situation is different. So when you get asked, how do I start farming? Well, I got to know your situation first before you can answer that question, because there's so many variables to that.
Well, you sound pretty handy, and most of the guys that I know that are young farmers that have started out by being handy. They took something, made it work for what it was. They re-welded it. They did something there. For the guy that's not handy, but maybe intellectually smart, but really not very, handy at all.
Find some friends that are.
I was going to say,
I can answer that.
how important is it to be handy?
I can answer that perfectly because I'm not mechanically inclined. I can fix something in the field, something small.
Okay.
I can wrench in the shop a little bit, but Jaron that works with me can fix anything.
Yeah.
So you got to find people that are really good at what you're not good at.
Okay.
And take care of them.
Surround yourself with them and take care of them well. The welding shop up the road or whoever, when they give you a bill, pay them in cash and pay them a little extra, because then when you call them, they're going to pick up, they're going to show up, and if you're not,
Like what you do with a bartender.
essentially.
I have a ton of flat tires on the farm because I'm so spread out north to south. When I have a flat tire, I took it into the local tire shop because I don't have a tire machine. Well, it got to the point where, like, if I showed up, I was getting to cut in front of everyone because I take them so many tires. If I showed up on Friday and they had 6 tires ahead of me Saturday morning, mine would get pushed to the front so I could be there and pick it back up Saturday morning. It's just developing those relationships.
Yep.
And I guess you'd call it scratching each other's back. But if you're consistent with them, they'll be consistent with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to just being well known in the community too. I mean, you're gonna, if you have a good reputation and you give somebody a call needing help, they're gonna show up.
To answer your question earlier about the equipment thing, I started off. I got a loan for a decently nice pickup when I went off to college. Quickly learned that was stupid. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you drive. I sold that and used the money I had on the truck loan to buy a tractor. So then I had an old rusty $10,000 tractor. I got an old piece of junk 6-row planter. Ran both of those for a year. Went to a consignment auction, bought some stuff slightly nicer, fixed it up, used it for the year, took it back to the consignment auction, and just have constantly been redoing that. Or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, buying something probably worn out, fix it up, use it, resell it. Now that has worked really well because of inflation in the past couple of years, and everything's worth more. The second it turns around and the economy goes the other way, that sort of mindset won't work. But it's worked right now.
Point where you have something you can use.
Right now, I'm to the point where I've got really well-maintained used equipment that will last me through a potential downturn, which I'm sure is coming.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about growth earlier. When interest was 2-3% when we got in at a good time. I was able to buy a piece of, I bought almost 400 acres, but I bought it when interest was low. If I were to buy that same piece of ground now, for what it appraises for now, first of all, and second of all, for the interest rate that it is now, my payment would be almost double what it is right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of discouraging for me to tell a new guy, now's a hard time to get in, but it's not impossible. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to make it work.
Yep. But historically, we're crazy low on interest rates when you're talking back to the 80s and we're talking double digits. We're not even there. So it depends on who you talk to how discouraged you are. You might be, well, heck, it's really good.
It's average, right? And that's
versus.
But I don't know any different from when I got in, and I didn't go through the 80s. But I will say, interest now, I've kind of pumped the brakes on being super, super aggressive to pick up more land. I just want to pump the brakes and maybe catch up for a year or two. That way, if we do have a downturn, I'm still sitting good.
How about, Gavin, you talked about buying equipment. Maybe you saw a deal, something like that. Do you guys ever use, being an auctioneer, I see people, I'm going to call it trading stock. They don't even need this sprayer, but they see a deal or an opportunity to fix it up.
I've done
let's
that.
fix it up, and let's just use it as trading stock, because I know that, Ethan needs a sprayer. I'm going to trade him, but he's got something that so back to the barter system a little bit, but you kind of keep your ears open for what other people need, and then you just buy trading stock. Have you, as a young person, is that wise at all to buy trading stock?
I've done that and been successful with it. I never had someone else in mind for what I was buying. I just thought, oh, that's a good deal. I know I could sell that for more money.
I can fix it up and make more.
So I would do that.
Okay.
Never with someone in mind for who it was going to, but I definitely have done that.
Okay.
You got to be scrappy like that.
Yep. I've done it and got burnt on it too.
Yeah.
I've bought stuff that I'm like, oh, I'm getting a good deal, and then you actually and it's like, oh, well, it needs an engine rebuild. And it's like, oh, well. Now I hope I can get out what I got in it, you know. And that goes both ways. It's risky. It can go really good or really bad.
Right. If Corey was on the bikes, he would say he has more of those experiences than the opposite.
Yeah.
He just bought one from me the other day. Not my company, but
online auctions.
He's addicted to online auctions, he says.
Yeah, they'll get you. They'll get you.
As you reflect on your farming careers, and it's just the beginning of them, what is something that is attributed most to the success? Is it just flat out working hard? Or
Not necessarily.
You got to be smart.
I would say you have to remain optimistic because you're going to get gut punched multiple times. I mean, like, you can't avoid it. It's going to happen. You have to be optimistic and think, oh, that sucked. Let's try it again. You got to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to make it very far.
No. And, one of it takes a lot to get under my skin, but it burns me when people say, well, it must be nice. It's like, well, yeah, it must be nice to go home and you're home. Like,
sure.
I am never not, in my head, I am never not working. It is always in my head what I have to do, or, scrolling Tractor House or scrolling Facebook Marketplace, looking at a plat, but it's never not, it's not something you shut off. It's always there.
Do you think you mentioned this, Gavin, earlier, that you had the fancy truck and you said, well, nobody cares. I'm going to go back down. I'm going to say that most of even my kids, they want the fancy truck.
Right.
They want. Did you have to lower your expectations? I mean, for our listeners, should they not necessarily lower their expectations, but lower the I can't have the brand new paint. Did you have to change your mindset a little bit to make it work?
So, kinda, but I will also say I'm pretty well just recreating my childhood through my farm. So I love buying and trading equipment because I had all the toy tractors as a kid.
Okay.
So I'll buy a tractor and I'll have it for a year and try to be like, that's cool. I want this other one now.
Yep.
So I'll do that and bounce around, but I never do it with brand new stuff.
Okay.
Yes and no. I guess I didn't really have to lower my expectations. I just had to live within my means. So if I can't afford it and I want to keep farming, I can't have it anyway, so it doesn't matter. There's no point in missing a $500,000 tractor because it would be obnoxious to have anyways.
Right.
Gotcha.
And you're going to have to live like that when you start out. If you want to start farming, having the big diesel pickup is not the key to that. You can drive a 30-year-old rusted out whatever and put that money towards, honestly right now, put it towards inputs. Pay cash for inputs so you don't have to finance as much. Yep. Save yourself the interest, or
that is the
buy the piece of equipment you need. Buy the piece of equipment you need. Buy whatever it is, but put that money, instead of buying the vehicle that's going to just depreciate out, put that money somewhere it's going to make you money. Let your money work for you, don't work for your money kind of thing. And when you get that mindset, you'll get to the point where all of a sudden, if you want to go buy that truck, you can go buy that truck and you can pay cash for it. You're not going to have to finance it because you've let your money work for you and not the other way around. But getting started, you don't have that luxury. Getting started, you're going to have to kind of eat ramen noodles every now and then. I mean, it's that's part of it, but it's rewarding.
I'll give an example of something that worked out well for me just because I was in the right place at the right time, but should never work, and it was a complete accident that it was a positive outcome. I was in a pinch. I needed a tillage tractor bad. I went and leased one, and it was a fancy new John Deere. It was only a couple years old. Well, because of inflation and the shortage in the tractor market, I ran it all year, put a bunch of hours on it, and made $20,000 on it. After running it for a year, I made $20,000, and I was just in the right place at the right time. And tractor markets went up in value. I could have never planned that. So you sometimes, you're going to have happy accidents. Sure. You can't plan on that happening because it shouldn't. I should have lost $50,000 on that deal.
Yep.
Right. There's a lot of that. People that have some success, there's a lot of that happens. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Yep.
So to the tune of that, when you think back to what you did to help make you successful, what is something that you started off doing that you aren't anymore because you realized it wasn't working?
For me, custom spraying. I had a custom spraying business with a friend from high school, and that you can be very successful in that business. but it just didn't work for us, and it didn't fit the direction we're heading. So you have to shed your ego a little bit and say, this is not working. We have to stop. Like, if we keep going down this road, no good thing is going to happen. So you might as well just quit now. It's going to hurt now, but it's going to hurt even worse later. So you have to kind of take the emotion out of that a little bit.
What about you?
I used to have the mentality as long as I was busy, I was making money. As long as I was working, I was making money. It could be the most piddly, mundane thing, but as long as I was working towards something. That couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes you're just spinning your wheels and burning fuel to do nothing, really. You got to take a look at what makes you money. You got to really... Anybody can drive... I wouldn't say anybody, but most people can drive a tractor. That is not hard to figure out. But how to run a farm, you've got to put a pencil to things. And when you start putting a pencil to things, you start realizing the things that aren't working out for you very quickly.
So he just asked you something that you maybe eliminated because it doesn't work, and then you talked about time management. There's a time management scale that says we start at the top of the funnel and we say, what can we eliminate first? Next thing is, what can we delegate? We talked about hiring hands. The next thing is, what can we automate? Do you guys automate anything yet? Like, is there something like Corey has automatic triggers on his hog buildings so that it saves him time? And you're as a new guy in the business, is there anything that you're already trying to automate that, like grain markets? Do you hire somebody to do it?
Ethan can answer first. I got to think on that because I just got to think on it for a second.
I don't hire anybody to do my grain marketing. If somebody wants to hire me, I could make them a lot of money, and my plan is I'll call them when I sell, and they can sell the next day when we limit up.
Is that how that works?
That's typically how my luck goes with that. But no,
You should start a business like that.
Automation, I mean, I'm having concrete poured today for bins that will have cable system in them that, it'll kick fans on, kick fans off.
So you're working towards it.
Payroll, I have that kind of set up, automated. On the accounting aspect, having a good accountant where I can just take stuff in, they make really good reports of, and I've started using a program for that too, where
very good.
And it gives you a glimpse of where you're at all the time, and you have to know that.
But then you don't have to sit and do the research and more of your time.
No, I look at that information that's provided, but it's already put together nice and neat. I don't have to spend the time making the spreadsheet. I don't have to spend the time making the graphs. It's already there.
Gotcha.
So, and that's huge. You got to know where you're at.
So let me rephrase it. What do you want to automate? What do you not want to do that, like, man, if I can make this automatic?
I can tell you what I don't want to automate.
Driving the tractor?
Yeah, that's my favorite part. But that will be one of the first things to be automated, unfortunately. I think in the next 10, 15 years.
I haven't really automated anything yet. So, like, when I started growing the popcorn, I did everything from beginning to end, packaging and fulfilling the order. Here for a while, I've had someone that can come in and do the packaging. Okay. So I figured out how to get good at it. I figured out a system that has worked, and now they can do that. They can print off the shipping label. They can take care of getting it to the post office. So it's still getting done, but I don't have to do it. Okay. As far as automating on the farm, not really. I would say my best example of that would be having someone I trust to pick out hybrids for me. I'll tell them what kind of dirt I've got, how many acres of good dirt I have to put this on, and let the seed guy kind of pick out what hybrids deserve to go there, so I don't have to go through the book. And they deserve what they get paid to do that because they know where those hybrids go. So I guess you could say I've automated a lot of that.
Okay.
But
it takes an army.
Robotic.
It does take an army to. I mean, there's less and less farmers all the time, and that is true. But you also got to look. How many guys are at a co-op? How many guys are at a machine dealership? How many guys are at a grain elevator? How many agronomists there are? How many seed salesmen? And, how many of them are out there to support one farmer? And granted, they're supporting multiple farmers too, but just ag as a whole,
I wish there was 10 times more people that wanted to be young farmers. we're going to have a huge issue going forward. I mean, the whole face of agriculture is going to change. In my backyard, I don't view young guys that want to farm as competition. They're kind of like comrades almost.
I'll help them out. Yeah.
Right. Because
All in this together.
yeah, I mean, if it doesn't go to a group of young guys, it's going to go to an already established farmer, which they've worked to deserve the chance for that.
Right.
But what's going to happen to the rural communities whenever the part shop closes? Because the big guy doesn't have to go to him for a little part here on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
I mean, everything starts drying up and dying.
He's got his own hose machine. He's got his own fittings in the shop. You're not going to the guy up the road.
I don't think we'll ever get rid of young guys in it, though, because one of the reason people invest in farmland is because no vacancy. Do you ever see a farm field that doesn't have crops? No, because there's always some young
someone
guy
that'll do
that
it.
wants to, it's a crappy field, but I'll tell you what, I'll take it. Just like you said, you'll get the scraps. That's why it's a great investment, is because unlike a hotel, maybe it's not full tonight. It is in Decatur, but what do they do the rest of the year?
Yeah.
They could have vacancy. Rarely ever do you have that with farmland, but that's because we have next generation always coming. So I'm still really positive about the next generation.
And we're getting more efficient too. I mean, this tractor, that combine sitting here, it's funny because it says 100th birthday over here. And 100 years ago, to do 10, 15, 20 acres a day was a big day.
Yep.
Big day for that tractor.
And for
That does it in less than an hour.
Right.
Yep.
We're way more efficient. Yeah. And I mean, equipment has scaled up and scaled up and scaled up, and now it's gotten as big as it can get because it won't go down the road. So now it's speed. How can we make it go faster, And there will never be a vacancy in farmland. I agree with that. But will the big get bigger, or will young guys have a chance to get in?
Yep.
That's the question.
So I think I want to take a two-question approach to kind of wrapping up the conversation today. I know that you have a definition of success. So how are you determining whether or not you had a successful year? Is it just there's more money in your bank than when you started?
A successful year,
Yeah.
just looking at one crop year. I mean, you obviously want to be positive for the year,
Right.
like, income-wise, but just learning some lessons that you can take into next year, always looking for growth, new ways to do things, trying to network more relationships and make real relationships, not just for the point of this, not forming a relationship just for, I hope I get to farm your ground one day. Actually forming a relationship that will add more to your life than just your income.
Business. Yeah.
Yeah. Try to just grow better as a person, get involved in your community.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a cop-out answer.
No, it's again the right answer because it's real. Yes, we need our bottom line to make sense.
Yeah.
But if I could learn something, if I could grow a new hybrid, if I could try a new tillage tool and learn from those, that's also another way to gauge success. Because
Yeah.
you may just break even. So the next step to this is what advice, we're sitting here, we've got listeners captivated all the way through the end of this. Somebody's ready to start, whether they are young or they just want to start. What's your advice?
Ethan, I'll let you have it first.
On the success thing, and this piggybacks into the next question. Obviously, yes, you want to make money, but to me, it's being able to help that next guy get started. Because it's an uphill battle. So success to me is being successful enough that I've got the means to help the next guy get his start, or just to provide more jobs for people in the community. As I grow, hire good people and pay them a good wage and give them a good life. That is success to me as well. But, I mean, going forward, to the guy that wants to get started, you're going to have to make sacrifices, whether that be time, whether that be money, whether that be selling your pickup that you just got so you could go buy your first piece of equipment. You're going to have to make sacrifices, but it will be worth it. If your heart's really in it, it will absolutely be worth it. It's an uphill battle, but it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
I would say just get started somehow, whether it's working for a farmer or finding a couple acres. Success that when you're wanting to get started, whatever is in your brain of how it's going to look is not how it's going to look whenever you eventually get there. Because I'm not really doing much of anything I thought I would be doing exactly how I thought I would be doing it. You have to kind of put together a puzzle, and those pieces will not always come in the shape you expect them to be. So, but just get started and be willing to take a little bit of risk and start when you're young. I don't think anything I'm doing I could do as a 40-year-old. But it helps that I'm very young. I have no wife. I have no kids relying on me. If I screw up, I can start back at zero, and I'm still 25.
See, and Tanner, I've thought about that a lot, is do it when you're young, because even the barriers to entry, no house payment maybe, no truck payment, no kids in school, no diapers, no nothing yet, you know. So the older you get, the harder it is to leave that other job where you work
Right.
W-2 wage or something like that. So, yeah.
Take that risk when you're young.
I've ran into that. I mean, I'm married with 2 kids now, but I wasn't married with 2 kids when I started.
When you started.
What made me very nervous is when I finally left working anywhere else and was 100% on the farm.
It's a big jump.
It was. And not long after, kids are in the picture, and it's like, well, we got more mouths to feed. Our house had gotten struck by lightning and pretty well trashed it, and it's like, well, we got to find somewhere to live, and we need more space, and we're doing an addition, and life happens, and you're never going to know that. You're never going to know what's going to happen next. If we did, we probably wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
That's right.
Or we'd be doing it way more successful, one or the other. But, you got to humble yourself, too, from time to time, because some people would look at it as when's enough, but that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is working towards that next thing. But you also have to be able, for the young guy that does get started and say he's 2 years into it, he needs to take a look back, even though he's only 2 years in and he's looking at, I wish I had my own combine. I wish I had my own planter. He's got to look back at, yeah, but a year ago, me a year ago would be more than happy with where I'm at right now.
That's true.
And you got to kind of remind yourself that every now and then.
That's a good reflection. Well, gentlemen, this has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
What I grabbed, I put 5 stars on notes that you had said. The first one was think outside the box. You can't do it like everybody else is doing it in order to try and get ahead. So to think outside the box, to live within your means as a way to get ahead. Because if you're spending more than you're making, it's not going to go forward very quickly. Treat people well, because the other one I wrote down is it takes an army. So if you are going to be working with your entire community and people around you, the way you treat them is really going to stick out. And then I loved what you just said, Gavin. The piece of the puzzle can look a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But it can still go together for you.
Yeah.
How you need it to. So, gentlemen, this has been a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
Gentlemen,
Hopefully
thank you.
Our listeners really enjoy this episode. We thank everybody for sitting out here. I know it was hard to hear me, but glad that you stuck around and had a good time as well. So, listeners, until next time, have a good one.